Hello, everyone. In the interest of time, I think we'll go ahead and begin our webinar. Again, my name is Sean McSpaden. I serve as the Executive Director for the National Information Sharing Consortium. I want to welcome you all to the NISC Mission Focused Job Aids webinar series. Today's webinar is co-sponsored by the NISC and SABER, which stands for the Single Automated Business Exchange for Reporting. Today's webinar is entitled Get Business Status During Disasters through SABER. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Jessica Carrington from G&H International for her great work in setting up and coordinating today's webinar. Next slide. So on to our agenda for the next hour. First, I'll provide a brief overview of the National Information Sharing Consortium. I'll then turn things over to our primary speaker. Finally, we'll move to a brief question and answer period and a brief quiz at the end of the webinar for those of you who would like to obtain continuing education units for participating in today's webinar. Next slide. Again, I'm Sean McSpaden, Executive Director for the National Information Sharing Consortium. Our primary speaker for today's webinar is James Morentz, who serves as the Executive Director for SABER. Next slide. As I mentioned, at the end of the webinar, there will be a brief quiz for those of you who would like to obtain continuing education units for today's webinar. Jessica, do you have anything you'd like to say about CEUs, the process, G&H's role in that process, etc.?
Sure. Continuing education units are being provided by G&H International Services and is made possible through the service contract the NISC has with G&H. G&H is certified by the International Association for Continuing Education and Training, IACET, to provide CEUs at training events. Participants will need to watch the webinar and take the quiz after the webinar to receive the 0.1 credit. A certificate will be emailed to participants confirming the completion of the training and the quiz.
Thank you, Jessica. Next slide. So we do have a few learning objectives for today's webinar. They'll coincide or tie to the quiz for those of you wanting to obtain CEUs. By the end of the webinar, you should be able to understand the importance of businesses to a community's recovery from disaster. You should be able to identify the multiple ways that SABER can collect and distribute data. And finally, you should have a good understanding of how data from SABER can help emergency management and other agencies and organizations prioritize response activities. Just a quick reminder, if you do have questions during the webinar, please use the question feature within the GoToWebinar user interface. We'll be monitoring questions and chats throughout the webinar as well. Next slide. At the highest level, the National Information Sharing Consortium's Mission-Focused Job Aids webinar series is intended to be an in-depth and progressive discussion of the tools, techniques, and standard operating procedures used for information sharing across multiple fields and professions. Next slide. As I mentioned, today's webinar is focused on getting business status during disasters through SABER. It's the 11th webinar in our NISC Mission-Focused Job Aids webinar series for 2018, and it's the 15th webinar we've held since mid-2017. The dates for the webinars that we plan to conduct through March 2019 are listed on the slide, with registration links available on the NISC website by the link that's at the bottom of the slide. Our next webinar will be held on December 6th. It's entitled A Culture of Preparedness, Federal, State, and Local Training Resources. We're honored to co-host this December 6th webinar with the DHS Emergency Services Sector Agency and the DC Homeland Security Emergency Management Agency, two of our key partner organizations. We'd like to encourage you to register for that webinar and any other webinars that are available for registration at the earliest possible time. But again, back to today's webinar, we're very pleased to be partnering with SABER and look forward to working closely with James, his team, and the SABER group for the remainder of 2018 and beyond. Next slide. Very briefly, the National Information Sharing Consortium is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're devoted to improving situational awareness, system interoperability, and information sharing at all levels of government and for all Homeland Security, emergency management, public safety, first responder, and healthcare preparedness stakeholders. Next slide. NISC member organizations span the public, private, and nonprofit sectors across multiple disciplines and domains. That's one of the things that makes our organization unique, our great diversity in membership. At last count, the NISC has 543 member organizations in the United States, Canada, and in a few other countries around the world. Next slide. So I've had the honor and privilege of being part of the National Information Sharing Consortium since its founding. I serve as one of the 5 founding members of the NISC. Since that time, in June 2012 to now, in my view, the value of NISC membership has always come through the guidance and technical assistance that we gain from one another through knowledge exchange and networking opportunities with other member and partner organizations. And finally, through access to the materials, tools, and applications that we make available within the NISC member portal. I'd like to emphasize that becoming a NISC member organization is free. It's a no-cost proposition. With that, I'd like to encourage all of you and your colleagues that are not already member organizations to consider joining us as soon as you can. Next slide. With that, I'd like to turn the webinar over to your primary presenter for today, James Morentz. James?
Thank you, Sean. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules today to learn a little bit about SABER and how we provide business status during disasters. I want to leave you with the 2 concluding points right at the beginning. Point number 1, SABER is data. You're going to see lots and lots of things about different ways that the data gets in, many displays of different ways the data is visualized and used. But SABER is the data. You visualize it in your own software. You use it as you wish. So SABER is data is the first point. Second point is SABER's free data. There's no cost to provide data for businesses, no cost for governments to consume that information. So your 2 concluding points are, get the SABER data, and it doesn't cost you anything. In more detail, we'll go through that by taking a look first at the challenge and the purpose of SABER for those 2 sides of the equation, the businesses that provide the status and the governments who consume the status. And we'll kick it off by seeing what other people think about SABER, so you got a little bit of idea of the credibility, how it works, give you lots of examples of visualization and analysis, both in exercises and real-world examples. We'll finish up with some operational use cases so you can see where you fit into this SABER equation. So the challenge is that 40% of businesses fail after a disaster, statistic that has held pretty constant over the last dozen years or so. Most important fact in that is that a longer a business is out of business, the greater the chance of failure. Get somebody back quickly, and you're going to start getting the community back in operations, because business means jobs. People go back to work. Even during the emergency, when a business gets back in place, people have a place to go charge their phones, go to a convenience store and use the microwave oven to heat up some food. You get the fuel to be able to relocate, and businesses are hotels and places to stay. So all those things combined, when you bring the food and health commodities together, that's going to get people out of shelters. When you get construction supplies, that's going to get people out of shelters because they can rebuild their communities, all of which brings the community back to normal. As a result, a key priority is how do we get businesses back in business faster? SABER was created to do that. SABER was started with a call from Brian Lowe, who ran the Business Emergency Operations Center in the state of Florida, who knew about a project that I had been working on with DHS on information sharing. And he said, couldn't your information sharing tool help me with a problem? And that problem is when a hurricane comes rolling through Florida, we have to sit here and call 50 different major corporations and say, tell me the status of your business operations in Florida. And I said, yeah, we could probably help you on that. And he said, well, let me bring in the other side. And he brought in Jim Williams from Walgreens. And Jim said, well, I have a different problem. When a hurricane comes rolling up the coast, East Coast, I get calls from about 1,000 different jurisdictions that say, hey, is your store open? Is your store open? When's your store going to open? So we both have the same problem, flip side of it, but it's a significantly different scale from businesses in multi-state operations and governments trying to get their operations going. Both of them answering those questions a complete distraction to what they're trying to do. Businesses trying to open their stores, government trying to satisfy the needs of the public. So SABER was founded by an organizing group, good folks, Walmart, Walgreens, Target, Macy's, Costco, Boyd Gaming, Lowe's, Sears, big, important people to bring back into an emergency. It's a nonprofit, and our whole purpose has been to use this information to influence two things. First of them, to influence government recovery priorities to do what's necessary to get businesses back in business. And secondly, to enable business-to-business brokering of goods and services that allow, again, businesses to get back in business faster. So a whole lot of what we're trying to do, as we begin to see on the next slide, is create an environment that begins to deliver results to individuals. The next slide, please.
I apologize, I'm having just a moment of technical problems. Give me half a second.
Okay. There we go. Thanks, Jessica. So let's take a look. And I've told you why there's a SABER. Let's take a look at what some of the other people think about it. Well, in 2017, we won the Individual and Community Preparedness Awards from FEMA for technology innovation. In 2018, on the next slide, we see that we've got the International Association of Emergency Managers Partners in Preparedness Award for public awareness. And on the next slide, we're going to see that the technology that sits behind SABER, Exchange Core, and we'll learn a little bit about that in a minute, was recognized as a Department of Homeland Security geospatial ConOps best practice. So for most of the last 4 years, somebody somewhere has said SABER is doing the right kind of thing. So now let's take a look at what that thing is. On the next slide, we're going to see how SABER works. Well, there are 3 different ways that information gets into SABER. The first full way is a fully automated connection from some internal business management system to SABER. Right now, we only have one organization that's doing this, Walmart. But we're in the midst of working with a couple other companies because of the value of having a untouched by humans' hands connection to SABER. The second way is that we have a more common way. The majority of people are providing their information by a spreadsheet. Now, I was stunned. Some of the largest companies in the country that we just referenced, when their business continuity people report on the status of a business emergency that's going on, up to the chief executive, the way they do it is put the problem on a spreadsheet and email it up. So we discovered, and this is one of the key things about SABER, and again, stressing that SABER is data, that people had many different spreadsheets, as you might imagine. Well, instead of saying, here's the major information that you need to have, we said, whatever you're doing, I'll take it. And we'll use the technology to process it into national standards, the National Information Exchange Model compliant standard format for an incident. So we use the technology, bringing in any data that anybody wants to give us, and delivering it in a standardized format. So absolutely critical to this was saying to the companies, do nothing different. That's why we've got, now we're pushing 50 or so major companies that are part of SABER. The third way, though, we started teaming with a company called Spot On Response, developed a mobile app that can be used both out in the field and as a web application in the operations center to do field status reporting that actually, you'll see later on, puts the ability to get the SABER information directly into SABER from a handheld device by a manager. All three of those, as we see on the next slide, combine to move the information into this SABER technology, the Exchange Core, the Department of Homeland Security Information Sharing technology that I mentioned before, and then out the other side in ways that just about anything else, let's go back to that one, sorry, that just about anything else can use, whether it's a government or public web portal, whether it's incident management applications like BEOC and eTeam and all the others that are out there, a common operating picture like ArcGIS Online or GeoCollaborate, mobile apps used by fire and police and others, or even a free copy of Google Earth. So again, emphasizing SABER is data. What you do with it on the outside is entirely up to you. And as we see on the next slide, it's incredibly easy to use that. It's the technical architecture at a very high level, clearly. A couple of points on this. First of all, every bit of this is run by a combination of the SABER community and the Exchange Core community. SABER operating the organizational side, Exchange Core operating the technical side. As a community, all of the software for this operation, I managed to have graduated from the Department of Homeland Security and released in an open source format for the benefit of the Exchange Core community. So on the left-hand side, there are all these different ways that you can get information into SABER, from GeoRSS feeds and CSV, which is just a plain old spreadsheet, to building a more complex SOAP connector or a GeoJSON that comes out of lots of different software. Those go into SABER through a set of things that SABER has built, but all that code, Java and C# for .NET, all that code is freely available on the Exchange Core repository, open source repository on GitHub. On the right-hand side is the way that information gets out. And all of that, again, is available in an open source format. And in the middle is Exchange Core itself, and all that is open source software. So should someone want to come in and say, gee, I wish it could do this, and we have people doing this all the time, we're adding to the Exchange Core base as part of the community. So on the right-hand side, lots of different applications. So on the next slide, we're going to see that all of these things have this funny stuff in the middle. It's National Information Exchange Model data package, and you need to know absolutely nothing about it. But this is the data that gets brought in from what would look like an Excel spreadsheet, transformed into this standard format that allows lots and lots of other organizations to be able to read it. On the next slide, because we put it out in many common formats. There's a REST GeoJSON output, which can be built into an ArcGIS feature service. So those of you with ArcGIS, which is an awful lot of you, it takes a minute to add SABER data into your ArcGIS. Comes out as a KML feed. Again, same data, different format though, that is processed through ExchangeCore. A KML feed, which will go right into Google Earth. The SOAP connector into the more complex and less, let's call them less open software like WebEOC and some of the other tools. That's a little more complicated. A GeoRSS feed, really easy. You can even put it into an Excel, or I said it would take you a few minutes to put it into make an ArcGIS feature service out of it. Take you 1 minute to get an RSS feed and put it into your ArcGIS. And then finally, there's a pure XML feed that with the right parsing software, you can put it into any website that you want to. So let's take a look at the next slide. And what we're going to do is go through and take a look at a set of visualization and analytical uses that have been made of ExchangeCore and all the SABER data associated with it. The first of these, it says analysis through the FEMA GeoPortal, is Hurricane Irma last year. SABER data processed by FEMA into a number of different ways, pushed out through the FEMA GeoPortal. Here you see they categorized it into a number of areas of big box stores and pharmaceuticals and hotels. First illustration that SABER's data and FEMA is able to use it or uses it in a number of different ways. On the next slide is the Georgia Homeland Security Agency and Emergency Management Homeland Security Agency. Absolutely brilliant conceptualization of using the SABER data with Esri tools, ArcGIS tools, to create the map, create icons representing the variety of different tools, total numbers up in the upper left-hand corner, and this was Hurricane, this may have been Irma also last year as it came up through Georgia. You can see they were only concerned about Georgia, so they have basically cut the Georgia area out of all the SABER data. Bottom left-hand corner, nicely done categorizations in a pie chart. So a beautiful example of the folks down in Georgia who just did wonderful work as part of this. Next slide. Here's just a straight cut and paste, literally. Click on the add map, paste in a link, and you get this kind of visualization with ArcGIS. Down the left-hand side, it picks up every possible category that you can decide which one of the fields inside of SABER data you're going to categorize on, corresponding dots on the map. Great, easy use of the ArcGIS Online to do it. Next one is going to be a look at a WebEOC implementation. Now this is more complicated. It uses a set of software, again, that's freely available, downloadable from the ExchangeCore open source collaboration site. This one from an exercise out in California. And you see that using the standard WebEOC board, and you get a SABER incident board that you can download from SABER, and able to do the same things that you do with any WebEOC. You can even, with the right implementation of this, or with a full implementation of it, you can even make this into a two-way implementation. So if you're running a business emergency operations center, you can go in there and say, hey, we just got a phone call from this company at this location, and here's their current status. On the next slide, we're going to see a different GIS approach from GeoCollaborate. They use an Esri background tool, but put a whole lot of things on top of it. Here you see the national level exercise last year, which is a hurricane in the middle Atlantic states. Again, this is the impact zone for the hurricane. It's the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. That's all they cared about. So they used the GeoCollaborate tool to cut that out. And those are all the SABER data that you have seen pass back and forth. The next slide comes out of this year's hurricane season. All right, the ESRI publishes a group, I believe it's called, of the 2018 hurricane season maps and layers. You can go in, select any of this information in there if you see down in the bottom right-hand corner. Thanks to Kevin Armstrong of Esri in Charlotte. They publish a Esri feature service containing the SABER data and made it available to everyone. On the next slide, we see a very different approach. This done by Eric Kantz at the Trusted Ops organization. This is from last year's hurricanes, and it was done for National Emergency Management Association and the International Association of Emergency Managers, putting together this public-private information sharing portal. But the point is, using this Setscape tool set that he has, Eric's been able to do the traditional geospatial stuff that you see down the bottom, but then also time series analysis, frequency analysis, do a whole range of bar charts and pie charts and other things like that to be able to, again, take the data and ferret out all the key information to make it useful, most useful, for any type of analysis that one would want to see. The next slide, this one's going to take us out west, the Arizona Department of Emergency and Military Affairs. This current year's, this was summertime, 2018 National Mass Care Exercise was a simulated earthquake in Southern California with everyone evacuating into Arizona and eventually on to New Mexico. And here, great job done by the Arizona GIS department in pulling together the information from SABER. Again, GIS representation, classifications on the right, business disruptions by type in bar charts across the left, being able to go through and find different categories of them, do searches on it, filter, and be able to, again, conceptualize the issue of business disruptions in a mass care about who's run out of gas, what hotels are filled and closed, and be able to support all the other parts of the analysis of that. I'll mention one thing at this point also. This is for an exercise. In an exercise, SABER will set up a sim cell. We'll hear what your exercise problems are. We will create a series of time sequence injects that go through SABER to represent anywhere from 3 or 4 to a dozen different types of businesses and provide that to you for use as stimulus in your exercise, all built around the master sequence of events list when you share the key parts of it with us to be able to support you in doing any type of a business-related exercise or exercise in your business emergency operations center. So again, data, we can simulate it and use it as part of your exercise. Next slide is going to show my favorite of all. It has to be. Free copy of Google Earth. And we just had this in the last hurricane. Somebody called up and said, I just heard about SABER. We're on all the National Business Emergency Operations Center calls. He said, I just heard about SABER. What can you do to get me going? And I said, do you have Google Earth on your computer? And she said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. So I said, all right, I'm emailing you this link. Go up to your network link, paste that in there, call it SABER, click OK. And in under 5 minutes, we had somebody who had never seen SABER before, 10 minutes before, being able to visualize SABER at no cost to them because they had the free copy of Google Earth. Next slide. A far more complicated and informative way to look at it is through a product called Live Earth. Beautiful application. You can run simulations on it. It brings in multiple types of live information. Here we've got some hurricane information. This again was from Hurricane Irma last year. You've got the hurricane radar over top of it. You've got all the SABER sites. There's traffic information buried in there. It's just a ton of things to be able to, again, create this visualization that allows you to begin to make important resource allocation decisions. Next slide is the Florida Common Operating Picture. Gator, a very early participant in SABER, as I mentioned earlier. Here, this is Hurricane Matthew from a couple of years ago. And you see, what do we have? Target and Walgreens there, laid in with all the other layers of information, if you look down the left-hand side, that are available as part of their Common Operating Picture, to be able to do that analysis and get the right visualization for people to make decisions. Next slide comes back to the group I mentioned earlier, Trusted Ops, and that's for this year, where they put together something called the Unified Information Portal, and it brought together a number of different sources of information, SABER being one of them, some of the things from North Carolina, FEMA information, and others. And here, what they actually did was reapply the use that was made from the Georgia site that we showed earlier. They used that, inserted it into their application, changed it around a little bit, and were able to create very quickly a FEMA SABER representation that was combined with all the other information to give their customer base exactly what was needed. Next slide shows a different approach. South Carolina Palmetto Vision, it's a product called CloudEOC, does everything that you would ever want to do in emergency management, and SABER data there. This from a simulation across the country with all the different SABER data available. And what we've been able to do is, again, completely different application because it's data. Next slide. You want to see that it's really just data? Take an RSS feed, plug it into Internet Explorer, and you can see all the data. Even does a nice job of doing some tabulation for it. So at any place that you want to see and use this data, it's all yours. Next slide's going to take us to more complex look. Did this for FEMA last year in the hurricanes, a time series analysis showing the trends in reopening, that lots of people closed, more people closed, and you start getting some reopening that's taking place across a period of time by percentage, by different types of categories of stores. So you can build it in many different ways. Next slide is going to show the National Business Emergency Operations Center just a couple of weeks ago in Hurricane Michael. And on the next slide, we see that they use the SABER data, upper left-hand corner and bottom left-hand corner, to get the business status reporting and then visually compare it to retailers and pharmacies, showing over a period of a couple of time periods the growth in the problems that are occurring. Next slide. It's going to show us again the SABER data juxtaposed to a total look at retail closings from a number of different sources that are able to show the rapid closing that took place and then the reduction in the number of closures as it took place. So if we move on to the next slide, you've now seen a variety of examples of ways in which people visualize and analyze. I want to take you through a couple of hurricanes to show you some of the key lessons learned about using SABER data. This begins with Hurricane Maria from last year. On the next one, we're going to see that something that we call a bellwether. I mentioned that automated connection into SABER. The Walmart currently is the only company that has that automated connection. But what that lets us do is see a little bit into the present and the future, because it's always happening. If I look on the SABER status map right now, I may see in Iowa a Walmart that is closed because there's a pipe that broke. what we have here is, with that real-time look at Walmart status, was Hurricane Maria hit the, I'm going to say, mid-morning. This is the previous day. Before other companies, once they're putting inserting their spreadsheets, before the other companies really had even stood up their operations center. And we were saying that the day before, Walmart was doing preemptive closing. That indicated to us that people on the island were taking this very seriously. By the next day, on the next slide, when we see the operation centers and those submitting authoritative spreadsheets come in, we start to see we've got Sears and CVS and a bunch of hotels, both in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, that are all there. And on the next slide, we're going to see that that whole growing indication of loss was then visualized both on the SABER status map that you see up at the top, ArcGIS in the bottom left-hand corner, Google Earth, all looking at the same set of data, different organizations, but all beginning at the point of the actual impact of the hurricane to see the real extent of the effects that are taking place. We can look at the next slide. It'll be Hurricane Michael. And the next one shows that we get the Hurricane Michael. It's really before the hurricane landfall happened, in those the day or so before, and it actually struck on a Wednesday midday, if I recall, and this was Tuesday morning. We brought the band back together, as it were, the SABER community, the Arizona Emergency Management, Military Affairs, teaming with Georgia. Arizona was hosting the ArcGIS feature service. Again, we're a community. And Georgia made their dashboard available to everyone. On the left-hand side, you see we got the 3 different ways the data was coming in, the automated stuff, the spreadsheets and the mobile app, all that getting transformed into the GeoJSON format, which then got transformed by Arizona into the ArcGIS feature service, which made it available on ArcGIS Online and other sources. By landfall the next day, on the next slide, we're going to see that we've got lots of people localized, and the mobile app illustrating there on the SABER status map. There's another way to look at it, but our recommendation is that you use your application so that you're integrating it with your data rather than coming to the SABER website. But we do this as a convenience through our partner Spot On Response. So Tuesday, Wednesday morning, the status map is beginning to grow. By the next slide, on Wednesday landfall, we've got discrete number of closures that have happened in that panhandle and a little bit moving into Georgia and Alabama area. You see C69 there using the Georgia tool set there. On the next slide, Thursday, the hurricane had moved north substantially into Georgia, even a smattering in South Carolina there. And here we're looking at a different tool, the Central United States Earthquake Consortium, Regional Common Operating Picture. They came to us and said, hey, can we make our COP available to people who don't have any mapping resources by putting the SABER information on it? And great little team worked with our group, grabbed the data, put together this nice look of total number of closed businesses, and then across the middle, the bar chart by state, and across the bottom, the pie chart by different types of businesses, different icons for each of them. Very, very nice visualization and a little bit of analysis of the SABER data. So that was Thursday, grew up to 215. On the next slide, though, you're going to see something that I noticed. And compared to Hurricane Irma, if you recall back, there were 400 some sites closed in Georgia, and we had 215 closed in Georgia and Florida during this case. And I think it was a little odd, seemed a little low. So I did a little bit more analysis and discovered that by Thursday, while the storm was heading north, because it was rapidly moving, we actually had stores opening in the panhandle. Because, as a result, the number of stores never reached the huge number that had happened in previous hurricanes because this one moved so quickly. Stores were reopening. On this slide, looking at the spot on response tool set, you see the little red square icons saying Sears, and then the yellow list on the left-hand side. There were 9 Sears holding stores, which include auto centers and Kmart's and others, close in that panhandle area on Wednesday afternoon. Thursday midday, only 2. So we began to notice this reopening of stores, which, again, getting back to that, how do we influence government response by showing this information? It sure tells me that if I was going to bring in special relief supplies that could be purchased out of Sears, I may not want to be going to those places over on the left-hand side. Clearly need better damage assessment than that. But if I'm taking a first blush look at this, I'm saying, hey, people are getting back into business there. Therefore, the supplies that they're offering become available. Next slide is going to bring us, Eric Kant's Trusted Ops view, again, of the numbers increasing here. We're up to 267. You can see a number of different sources coming out of FEMA there as well, married in with the SABER data. On the next slide, we're up to Friday, 283, which I believe is the largest number that we ever saw. But you see they start to have a little concentration there. Concentration down in the south in the Panhandle where it first hit, and then up in the North Carolina area and into Virginia Beach, where the hurricane sort of took a second turn. And although the wind forces were down, the rains increased and had a substantial amount of flooding there. So we start to be able to see the changes in this storm. Again, this one is the Georgia system or dashboard there. The next slide, we see from that 283, we're down to 152 in that Friday, Saturday period. Lots of reopenings. Half of the organizations reopened. And here we're looking at that QSEC, private sector status board. Next slide, Sunday, down to pockets of disruption, 84 there. But we can also notice down on the left-hand side, that business disruption, still a very widespread range of stores that are open. So we're taking a look, understanding that it's not a specific type, but rather lots of stores open, but more isolated in these geographic areas. And on the next slide, Monday, Tuesday, while the landfall area shown there on the mobile app was still in need, 35 stores in that area, every place else was pretty much back to operations in that Monday, Tuesday time frame. So we see, again, from a business standpoint, Monday morning comes, that's when we're going to push to get back into business. Next slide. Let's take a look at the operational use cases. And the goal here is for you to see where you fit so that at the end, you can sign up for SABER, either as a provider on the business side or as a consumer on the government side. And let's start with case number 1. This is automated status coming direct from a company. So if you're a company, we can get automated status from you. Now you say, oh, gee, I don't have a status for my business continuity group showing which stores are open and closed. That's not unlikely. But you probably have a company-wide utility system or security system or personnel management system. Data from all of those can be extracted to say, you know what? There's nothing, no power on in this store. There's probably a really good chance that it's closed. Let's publish that we at least have no power in this store. That information could go to SABER. And that can be accomplished by a number of methods. It can be a shared file, it can be a dynamic output, it could be a query into the database, although that's less likely, but we can do it. So, automated status, case number 1, are you a company? Can you conceive of doing that? Because it means untouched by human hands. Case number 2 is where our stores call into a company ops center. This is most of the cases. going to be a 10 o'clock call from every store that's being negatively affected, or every store in a specific district. Going to go around just like you can imagine, say, okay, Tuscaloosa, you open or closed, Montgomery, you open or closed, and get the quick information. And somebody in the ops center is sitting there with a list of all the stores and saying open, close, late hours, open at 4 o'clock, whatever it is. That call finishes, the company goes into the SABER, clicks on their member login, clicks on their name, enters their password, and uploads the same spreadsheet that at that very moment is probably going up to the chief executive saying, here's the current status of our stores. Most companies are doing that once a day, some twice a day. SABER takes whatever you have. So when you go and look at SABER data, there's always the last updated date that you can see on it. And that is going to be the most recent thing that companies have done. Because once a company says, here's SABER, it's available to SABER in minutes, or all the SABER audience in minutes. But they may only be doing that once a day. You can see that from the last updated time. Case number 3 is similar, but here's saying, okay, maybe individual stores should submit directly to the SABER site, or well, let's group them into district managers. It's a way to offload some of the responsibility from a headquarters out to districts or individual stores. SABER doesn't care. You want to give the spreadsheet with 10 stores on it to every district manager, or 50, or however many they have. They're still going to go in. They're going to go in, click on your name, give a password, and that information is going to come into SABER. So third case is you are either a store with lots of districts, or perhaps you're a store with only 10, your company with only 10 stores. You probably don't have a full-time business continuity group, so you may assign to those 10 stores putting in the data directly into SABER. 2 stores are affected. You only have 2 people who are spending 3 minutes to go in, add themselves in on the spreadsheet, and upload it to SABER. Next slide. Case number 4. This is on the government side, Business Emergency Operations Center, who are maintaining a spreadsheet of all their members. Members send emails, members call in, and the BEOC then periodically uploads to SABER. I have one state that's doing this right now, and what they actually do is use SABER as their way to organize their data, because they take it from their spreadsheet into SABER, back into their own WebEOC, and back into their own common operating picture, because it was easier to do it that way than to have to maintain a spreadsheet into WebEOC, a spreadsheet into the common operating picture. So SABER can help in the efficiency on the government side as well. Next slide shows case number 5. And here we start to use the mobile app. Mobile app has a couple of advantages because you can put information to the mobile app. Situational awareness, company instructions, company plans. Government can provide information, and you can all do all of that with a pager-like alert that goes out that says all the district managers or all the store managers, hey, time to report. Next slide. When they do that, it's simply a company manager touching one of the 3 buttons for their store, saying, hey, you got no status to report, or I've got some limited hours or some closing that took place. That goes up to the state, up to the company, and on to SABER. But important note here, from getting the information into the company, and then what you provide to SABER is defined by the company. So you can get lots of information in from your stores, give little information over to SABER. Setting up one configuration file that we do with the companies, and again, it's a very simple process to do. Case number 6. This is the mobile app where a business emergency operations center subscribes to the mobile app and gives it out to all their companies, because they see the advantage of the companies being 2 things: aware they can push information out to all the companies on hazard monitoring. They can put the hurricane track out there. Government agencies can provide instructions. This is where we're going to be closing down a road in several hours, whatever it is. And you have that pager alert that goes out and says to everybody, hey, here's information coming in from the BEOC. So that's the one side, the provider side. And on the next slide, we're going to see that the stores then are able to, again, do the same thing, touch a green, yellow, red. That information goes up to the BEOC and then gets provided out to SABER. And from there, you can do anything you want with it. So members use the Situational Awareness app and report their status. On the next slide, we've actually had a couple folks say that this is a business emergency operations center in your pocket. You can, as the BEOC, you can provide awareness and operating reports, and even help the members be able to track their employees. And the BEOC gets back in really valuable information on the business status, of course, but also any damages to physical facilities, problems with infrastructure, like my electricity is on, but my gas is out, problems with communications. Whatever you want to gather from your members, you can define that information inside of the mobile app. So as we roll into the next and last case, this is one where with the SABER mobile app being used by companies get added value by empowering their employees. First of all that awareness gets to be put out to the employees when they're home, when they're trying to get to work, company instructions. But on the next slide, we see you can also then employee status is available. Am I in need of help at home? Am I going to be able to get to work? Can I get to work if you can provide me transportation, or if you can provide some daycare for the kids? So employees can report their status to the company, so their management and colleagues know everything about what's going on. And all this, anything with a mobile app, it comes with pictures and video recordings and all the other things. So the store manager can take a picture of their store condition so the company knows what they're doing, and the employees can do it as well. And on the next slide, we see that then allows the company to get information from their employees about whether they can work. The company then defines which of that information gets pushed on to SABER, and SABER then makes use of it all the way through. On the next slide, we see that all these different cases help you understand that the businesses are going to move more quickly, all rolled up into this mobile app, or on the next slide, we're going to see that it's the mobile app, it's the automated format, it's the business providing the information to be able to get a range of information in, from those early indicators of bellwethers to authoritative open-close status to more rich information about the damages to the facility that will allow everybody to track the stabilization of businesses so that you can see what you need to help them get back in business. And finally, it's going to help monitor the return to normalcy as you see those businesses reopen. So with that, I'll bring it to a close. If we could flip on to the next slide. Encourage all of you to help businesses get back to business faster, whether you're on the government side or the business side, by enrolling at saberspace.org. At this, I'll turn it back to Sean and take any questions.
Well, Jim, excellent content. Thank you so much for your excellent presentation and for informing our stakeholder group about SABER, Exchange Core, and the great things that are available to the community. At this point, we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and we have a few questions that we're going to get to in just a second, but for those who are still with us on the webinar, I wanted to cycle through the last few slides to remind you all that if you want to obtain continuing education units, we need you to hang on when we close the webinar for the brief quiz. Want to remind anybody that is not yet a member organization of the National Information Sharing Consortium, please consider doing that at your earliest possible time. Next slide. Wanted to remind everybody about our upcoming webinars. Please visit our website and register for those upcoming webinars as soon as possible. We'd love to have you with us again. Next slide. Great, and there's the quiz slide. So at this point, Jim, we've got a few minutes left. First, wanted to let everybody know we did get a question about sharing a link for the slides and for the webinar recording. A notification will go out to all registrants. Those who were able to attend today and those who registered but were not able to attend will receive very similar messages with the links to the slides for today and the webinar recording. We'll post that on our website. Jim, we had two questions. One came from a webinar attendee. Do you need Fusion to send data from WebEOC to SABER? Maybe you could respond to that.
You do not. Yeah, you do not.
Okay.
The SABER connector acts as a person with a username and login with no special permissions, and the SABER connector, in a sense, is typing the information into WebEOC. We have managed to avoid any additional costs for you.
Great, great. So essentially there's some kind of export of information into one of those approved formats. It's sent to SABER through Exchange Core and essentially consumed. Is that how the process works?
Yes, it is. And the connector that we provide does all that. So the only thing a WebEOC person needs to do is add the .web board in there and give a username and password and for the connector, and it allows the exchange to take place.
Great, great. The next question we got concerns the collection and housing or hosting of the data. Where is all this SABER data collected and housed? Do I need it on a server of my own, or is there a location available to house it?
Everything is out on the cloud. We use the Google Cloud, secure, encrypted, all those other things. And all you need to use it is any software that operates in a browser and an internet connection. So all the tool sets that you're commonly using can access, both provide and consume the SABER data off the cloud.
Okay. And I assume just a quick follow-up from my desk. Again, I'm sure you'd want to reemphasize that the provider of data to SABER, that the person who sends that information in is the one who needs to determine, what information can be shared under what condition, et cetera. Essentially, they're in control of what they share through SABER and ultimately what is available in regard to businesses in their area. Is that right?
That is exactly right. You can give as little as, here's the name of the store and it's closed, to as much information as you want to provide to support the rest of the mission.
Great, great. Thank you very much. Well, Jim, that was the last question that we received. Want to thank you again for a great webinar. Thank all our attendees and our registrants who were, for whatever reason, weren't able to join us. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and close today's webinar. Again, thanks, Jim, for your great work. We look forward to working with you in the future. Good.
Yes.
We're going to close today's webinar.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye, everybody.